All right, good morning. This is the Upper State Street Regional Action Plan facilitated by SB ACT as part of the Act on Homelessness Collaborative, which is working to reduce homelessness and its impacts in the city of Santa Barbara. I believe this is our third meeting and then our second meeting in our standard format. So this week is specific to community concerns. Last week, we discussed overall strategy for addressing impacts in the region. And there was several priority areas that were brought up as areas of concern in the Upper State Street neighborhood. And so what you'll see on the agenda is an attempt at prioritizing those regions. And so I want to first start with your feedback on those priorities. We usually focus on 2 or 3 for a 30 to 60 day period. Again, understanding specifically what that area is experiencing, going out to conduct our outreach and working with CityNet and other providers to address the needs of individuals experiencing homelessness in that region. And if there's other ways that we can work with city staff, code enforcement, law enforcement to also target resources in the region, we do that as well. There can be kind of natural barriers, man-made barriers, attempts to provide portable restrooms or trash receptacles or things that, again, would help reduce the specific impacts to that region as well. So I wanted to start first with the priority regions, a couple of logistical things that I want to reference. And Councilmember Sneddon, Kayla, can you put the agenda in the chat?
Yeah, I can.
So that everyone can have access to that. And then I'll communicate to the priority regions that have been highlighted. Because this meeting, the second week of the month, is specific to community concerns, please feel free to raise your hand, join the conversation versus putting questions in the chat. But Kayla will be monitoring the chat. If we have an answer to a question in the chat, absolutely she'll provide that, and then we'll lift those up to discuss them as we have and time allows. Just taking a pause to read. And Kayla, at any point, just feel free to interrupt to highlight a comment or a question in the chat. So first region being the South Hope, Larada, Hitchcock few blocks. And a few folks have mentioned this as a priority area, one for individuals experiencing vehicular homelessness, as well as some problematic behavior that has been observed in that region. The second being that service alley behind the Spud Nuts Tee Off kind of strip mall next to the Rose Garden Inn. I know that law enforcement has been patrolling this area regularly. CityNet staff has been back there regularly as well as security on site, and the Rose Garden Inn has been doing rounds in that service alley as well. So we can get to a few more details there. And third being Mackenzie Park. And Jeff has been in conversation with a few residents, as well as coaches and sports teams that frequent that area of problematic behavior that they've seen and observed, and some proposed solutions to be able to make it safe for families and children, but then also to provide support and services to individuals experiencing homelessness in that region as well. The other regions, again, still very important, and we want to make sure that are brought to the attention of both service providers and law enforcement. We have Stevens Park, the Denny's, especially in the back near the parking lot, McDonald's at 3940 State Street, the Arco gas station. I put Arco, the mention was a gas station, as well as the State Street on Terre Road cross section. And because that Arco gas station is at that location, I combined those, as well as the 7-Eleven. Anything in terms of priority regions, impacted regions that you want to make sure are captured, and then also just feedback on prioritization. And Kayla was able to capture and paste that in the chat as well to reference. Because this will be the focus, and next week is a site visit. So we go again with residents and business owners that are available to walk us through that region, understand what the needs and concerns are, so that we can more proactively address that. So this is Steve?
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Steve Ford. I'm a resident in the area of Grove Lane, which is about a block over from Ontario. I had expressed some concerns to Councilmember Friedman in the past, so he got me looped in on these meetings. Great. And I was joining today just because you have these regions. I just wanted to I agree with the ones you just went through, and I see that Big Five is also on there. I wanted to kind of make sure that one doesn't get lost, because I have personally witnessed some pretty aggressive and scary behavior in front of Big Five. And that being our only sporting goods store on the South Coast, I think it's pretty important to make that safe for family and kids to go in there. I just wanted to offer that.
Completely agree. And so I have that listed under other jurisdictions because that is Caltrans property behind there, that corridor where 154 meets Upper State. And so we did reach out to the County Encampment Response Task Force, and they do have that encampment not only highlighted and prioritized, but they have noted the growth. So CityNet has been providing outreach to that encampment as well as behavioral wellness. And so we will be able to get a detailed report about folks and if they've entered into case management and support services. And again, how they're addressing that we have seen that encampment grow over the last couple of weeks. What's been really helpful is that the county task force actually highlights specifically all the encampments that have been raised as a concern and then tracks them every single week. So if providers have engaged, what they're learning, what they're understanding, if it has been cleared, and then they'll keep rechecking it to see if it emerges. So thank you, Steve, for bringing that up. We do have that and we're tracking that, and we'll continue to report back as we receive more detailed information there. Same with Rocky Nook Park. So that has also been prioritized by the county task force. And we're looking to get more detailed information about how they're addressing what we're observing there in terms of the growth of individuals experiencing homelessness in that region. So that's county parks, and then the behind the Big Five sporting goods store is Caltrans. There's a question just about how we choose residents or business owners. We do not choose. So we put out a date and a time. And so it will be next Thursday. And so for these 3 prioritized regions, I think South Hope, again, if you're in agreement that that is a top region, we will walk that at a specific time of day that we hear from you, that you see the most activity. And then anyone who's available to join us for that site visit, it's just, as you know, much more helpful for folks who live in that area to be able to really pinpoint specific impacts that, again, we can work on addressing both short-term and long-term in that region. Any other feedback on prioritization, impacted regions that we're missing? And then I wanted to ask specific times that you would suggest that we do that walkthrough of the South Hope, Larada, Hitchcock area. The alley by the 7-Eleven in Arco. Yep. Thank you, Conrad. So I think that the alleyway, I haven't been back behind the alleyway where the TF Spud Nuts is, but the alleyway 2 at that Arco, I'm going to walk through that as well next week, as well as the Mackenzie Park area, just in terms of time of day to try to start understanding where we're seeing folks and what time of day we're seeing folks. I'm in the region pretty often. So again, just really trying to make those rounds specific so that we're taking and tracking our own notes as well. Any feedback just from CityNet? Al, I know that you've been doing a lot of outreach in the area in terms of just time of day. You feel like we could be able to connect with the most people and really understand, again, what the needs are in that region.
What I've seen, like I said, since we talked, I've been out there a couple of times, and it's more in the afternoon. I went in there in the evenings. I went there from 4 to 6 o'clock. I've been there after 8 o'clock. I go check out the Rose Garden property. You know, I drove by there one of the evenings around, it was 10, 12 o'clock, and I actually stopped by to talk to security. There was some things going on with security and staff and everything. It's primarily between the late morning to early afternoons where I see the highest traffic going on. And it was only a couple people walking through at the times. I never saw any instances of actually, you know, transactions or using going on, specifically behind the Express gas station, which I think the Arco you're talking about, yes, and the Kenny. So, you know, that little back alley between, I think, the fire departments right there. Mm-hmm. So that's just going through that area right there. One of the residents in the area after the meeting last week actually sent me some text messages. We were going, you know, just, you know, communicating. They expressed a nail salon. I didn't get specific. There's a couple of nail salons around there.
Yeah.
I did talk to an employee from Denny's. I'm waiting for the manager to get back to me. I stopped by Express while getting gas there too and introduced myself to a couple of the employees there. Gave them my number so they can contact me. I let the Rose Garden staff, and we're going to set up where I have a couple of our employees that are working at the Rose Garden to continue some outreach during those times out there, because it's simply across the street, and do, right behind, was it Tee Off and
Yes. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Bud Nut and everything behind the sushi spot. So right down that alley. And then, like I said, PD has been coming there every Tuesday and Thursday. They've been around over there. So that's made an impact as well.
Right.
I went up to McDonald's. I was a little late for that one, after we had the meeting that day last week.
Okay.
And they usually, because I know them from previously working with them, and I used to see them leave at 5, 6 in the morning to get up there to McDonald's very early. So they're usually they're pretty early.
Okay.
Familiar with the two, but I haven't caught up with them yet. But I know they are getting services. But like I said, I'll see what's something, and that's what I would like to hear back from feedback. Is like, well, what if they're getting services and we are able, to engage in, and if there's one specifically that like these ones are panhandling usually, their signs and everything, and they've been there consistently for a while. So PD should be aware of them as well. The community's aware of them. Is it more if they're doing, obviously focusing on drugs, alcohol, all those type of things, or, I guess I want to hear some solutions back from the community of what, they would like to do when it comes to they're doing case management, they're going up there, they're not really causing the trouble as far as illegal activity, but they are there.
Well, and that's that fine line too, right? That we are seeing, really kind of threatening behavior. People have been attacked, yelled at, screamed at in the evenings, again, by folks that are intoxicated or, again, experiencing mental health issues, or one or the other or both. So it is that, and again, Sergeant DeJean has been so helpful to say, feeling unsafe and seeing that level of activity, that you're calling 911. But also just making sure that if it is an individual that frequents that region, that we're also approaching them with support and services, if we know them to frequent that region as well. But Sergeant DeJean, any just update from law enforcement? And I also have the follow-up on just specific ordinances that can be utilized or have been utilized for enforcement in that region, as well as around schools and childcare centers. But general update from you in terms of what you've seen in terms of activity in the last week, as well as some impacts to the region, and update on the ordinances if you have any more detail there.
Yeah, sure. I feel like the last week it's been fairly similar, similar activity. I've been up there. There's been people to contact. There's been people in the parks on State Street. After the meeting, I reached out to one of our park rangers, city park rangers named Ernie, who is going to contact his counterpart with the county regarding the Rocky Nook complaints. So that should be something that's being looked at now by the county parks department. So that's a plus. In regards to the question about the ordinances, I spoke with one of our city attorneys, Denny Way, and we're actually in some ways better off than like LA, that has an ordinance that talks about camping within 500 feet of sensitive locations like schools. We're better off because we don't have a restriction for a camp to be illegal based upon its location to anything. So any camp within the city that fits the criteria of a camp, regardless of where it is, if it's in the public, that is an enforceable misdemeanor municipal code. And that's something that my team uses on a regular basis, and that I know our environmental service code enforcer, Chris Clark, he uses when he does his posted cleanups. Other than that, I think that's kind of it. I spent more time this week in that walkway we're talking about behind the Rose Garden that leads back towards the YMCA. And I am not finding anyone back there throughout the day. I'm there at different times. I'm not finding signs of people there. I 100% believe people are using it. I know historically they have. I'm just letting you know that it's very clean right now, and there are no signs of camps or hangout areas right now. We'll keep an eye on it.
Okay.
I just want to follow up real quick before with the big five. When I was up there, I've primarily been, checking the other side of the McDonald's. I will definitely go have the team get some feedback on going over there today. I might even stop by there myself just to go check it out. And understanding, I actually coach girls basketball myself, so I, very familiar with that. And my 12-year, that's where we bought her basketball in the area. So I definitely want to. I completely hear you from the community on that is our primary sports area, and we be able to make sure that's done, because I know Paige just started as well, so they'll be getting a lot more activity with the youth and our families going there. So I want to make sure we do our part to make sure that's clear. So we'll have an update next week on that as well.
Thanks, Al. And thank you, Sergeant Dijon. I appreciate that detailed update. A couple of things, just questions on the Rose Garden Inn. I saw Jessica having to take a call, but Brad, in terms of you providing a little bit more of an update there. So the end of the program in terms of the funding that has been approved by City Council is January 31st, February 1st, I believe. But funding in terms of supporting those individuals, we have rapid rehousing funds to help individuals that have been located in bridge housing programs throughout the county to be able to find housing. So we will support those clients, and CityNet has engaged and will continue to engage in case management for those clients, correct, Brad?
You are correct. Yeah, I think 27 of the 35 people currently are document ready, means we've got all their ducks in a row. We're actively searching for the vacancies. We're hoping there's a little bit of a changeover in the holiday season as sort of people transition, but we, not only the people who've been exited the program for behavior, we continue to case manage those folks as able from the streets. But our goal is to house as many people as possible as we sort of drive towards that January 31st. And then beyond that, particularly if they've got vouchers in hand, we will do everything we can with other resources, social service dollars and others that we're able to cobble together to maintain somewhere a bridge housing, whether it's still at the Rose Garden or elsewhere. That is our intention, yes.
Great, thank you, Brad. There's been a lot of comments just about what we define as success as part of the bridge housing program, and that 3 exits to permanent housing to date shouldn't be considered successful. And so a couple of things I just want to highlight. One is the reason why this bridge housing program was initiated was to clear encampments in fire-prone areas. And the ability to do that, the clearing of those encampments, and that those encampments have remained clear and have reduced the number of encampment-related fires in the region, it's successful. So I see Councilmember Senna nodding, and Councilmember Gutierrez is also here. That was the initial objective. So obviously, in terms of defining success, we'll communicate that first. The second piece is that bridge housing does provide stabilization for clients that are experiencing homelessness and that are living on the streets. These individuals in particular were living in encampments for a long period of time. So the ability and time to get them document ready, to get them access to housing vouchers when available. 7 of those clients that have been supported at Rose Garden Inn are now employed. Every step that we're able to take to get these folks ready and prepared for permanent housing, understanding what their housing needs and being able to provide those appropriate placements, we consider that successful. So I understand success to folks is different. So I just wanted to be clear in terms of how we define what we're trying to accomplish and the objectives that we've set out to achieve. But you are correct. If we have 38 clients that are being supported in the Rose Garden Inn and all of them are not exited to permanent housing, as service providers and partners, we take that hit, right? We say, we did everything we could to make that happen. And I appreciate CityNet's commitment to say we will continue to do whatever it takes to get them placed into housing. But I will say, just personally, the City Council making this investment, it's very significant, and what the impacts to the region were overall. To be able to support these individuals in temporary housing has been a success, to get them stabilized and to get them fed and taken care of, and taking medical care appointments and mental health appointments and case management appointments has been tremendously helpful. So we will continue to provide updates, and this Upper State Street Regional Action Plan will continue after the Rose Garden Inn program ends. We know impacts to the region will remain, and we absolutely need all hands on deck to be able to reduce those impacts over the neighborhood. Any other questions, Kayla, that you're seeing in the chat?
To raise the most recent question, Melody's question, thanks for typing that out, asking for clarification about how the Rose Garden Inn might continue to house individuals as well as open to regular reservations. Can we get some more clarity on that?
Brad, I'm not sure if the timeline, again, of being able to support people in scattered bridge housing throughout the city versus at one location. I'm not sure if that decision has been made yet.
Yeah, so, in preparation for January 31st coming, I mean, obviously we will be ramping down our program there. We, as a standard practice, not necessarily from this project in the sense that we take people from designated encampments that were fire risk and immediately move that entire population into a motel. That was unique to this project,
Right.
but as a general rule, we take advantage of motels across the region. Anyone that we could take advantage of that are relatively, that we can afford based on the budgets, that's a tall order. And so a number of them are scattered on throughout the city. Some of them are local in that neck of the woods. So we utilize that as a best practice, not necessarily from an encampment straight there, but oftentimes as we're preparing people, if they've got a voucher or if they're going through a process with us, if we can get them, just like all the residents at the current situation at the Rose Garden, anytime we can get them where they're taking showers every day, where we can check in, where they're sleeping in a bed, it is important for the reintegration process back into community, because we are putting these people back into, in many cases, in Santa Barbara, sometimes not, but in the city of Santa Barbara. So we want to make sure that that process works. So we will continue, not from a master lease standpoint, but we may be booking a room or two at various locations. We do that all the time.
Right.
So in that sense, we may continue to use something at the Rose Garden on occasion. We won't necessarily have people there all the time, but we would use that location and many, many others. And when I say many others, I mean like a dozen, 12 to 15 different motels across the city that we actually utilize on a regular basis.
Great. Thank you, Brad. And Al, we have a specific question to addressing the unique needs of individuals experiencing homelessness. We definitely know they're as diverse as our many residents in the city of Santa Barbara in terms of what they're experiencing. Those who are dealing with a level of mental health acuity and diagnosis versus those, again, are experiencing homelessness because of poverty or other issues. Those who have had substance abuse or drug use disorders or substance abuse disorders, and those that have maybe taken that up because of the trauma they're experiencing on the street. So, Al, can you just talk about how you manage a client, understand their needs, and connect them to specific resources based on what you're observing and what you're experiencing and hearing from that individual?
Before you jump into that, I now read the specific question from Melody, so let me just answer just one little nuance.
Great.
So we have instructed the Rose Garden to turn back on their reservation system. So that is active as of February 1st. So he has turned that back on. That is the intention. So he is taking reservations currently.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just a little bit of background in terms of case management and addressing individual unique needs.
Yeah, and so that's one of the beautiful parts. So I'll give you a quick breakdown of how it's done when we're doing the outreach, which has been, it's a little bit more difficult being able to, consistently contact someone. So like at the message you sent me from Judy is in regards to contacting the gentleman on Upper State Street.
Yeah.
When I called her right before this meeting, I was, asking, so where can I find this gentleman, to be able to, assess the needs. And she's like, well, he stays in Montecito sometimes, he stays on Upper State Street sometimes, he carries different bags, he has them in different areas. So that's the consistency of how it is when we're doing outreach case management. Because, and then identifying the need, whether it's, with mental health, so we connect it with behavioral wellness. I work with, like I said, whether it's John Masudo or, Luis Alvarado, so there's some really good that work with them, right? Whether it's with, ages, connecting them with ages if they're trying to get in some type of recovery and get themselves off of certain drugs that they have, If it's connecting them with Good Samaritan to be able to go in, get into a recovery. So getting them to like the sobering center, and from there connecting them to long-term recovery, centers. Whether it's just, their medical needs. So this was a huge thing that you guys know from the past 6 years that I've been in this business, this type of work, where I've been able to see everything from all different walks of life. And especially after this COVID, now we're getting some people that just simply lost their jobs, lost their income, and now completely, were like you and I, and then it just, the rubber hit the road and it just went down. So now with those type, we're actually looking for, areas where if we know this industry and this line of work, it's easier to get someone that is barely coming into homelessness out of homelessness, right? Because of everything we're talking about. The longer they're in homelessness, that's where all these effects start happening. The drugs, the alcohol, just the what is it, like the sense of, urgency to recover, because they start getting used to living in an encampment, in a tent on the side. So it starts to become somewhat normal. So when we had this project here at Rose Garden, to me, it was amazingly new coming from Pat, knowing that now we were fully rehabilitating the clients. I didn't go do an inspection in a room for 2 weeks. Okay, I usually go every Thursday and do a room inspection. Now, these are people that came from encampments. I went to their rooms last week. Every single room passed. What I mean by that, I property managed 60 units of previously homeless clients at El Carrillo Properties. These are all previously homeless clients that I work with that are here. Now, to see the way of living here and to see the way of living at Rose Garden, I literally was walking into rooms like, I would love for you, I would rent you one of these rooms.
Right.
Okay. I was walking into rooms where I walk in and, oh man, and that's where, like, when we do the walks, I would love, there are some clients there that would love for anyone in the community to say, come and check out my room. And I would love that. Just a simple fact for you to know that Rose Garden, I was there working there, and Sergeant Dejan and many of you that walked past there 5-6 months ago, compared to when you drive by it or walk in the property today, it is immaculate. And I hope we all pay attention to something like this, where when the project closes, I hope the property stays similar to the same. But if it doesn't, I want you guys to notice that, okay? Because the impact that we have made, there's always going to be good and bad in the community when it comes to this line of work. But the residents, the homeowners, the business owners in that community, I want you to pay attention to not only now, but before, now, and after. Okay. And if you're able to go through there and you see the difference in the way of living for someone that was on the street, that we do get, that's why we do our work. We get complaints of when, there's encampments in certain areas, so we have to go address them. And now this opportunity with 29 people being document ready now that we've talked about, that now we have with behavioral wellness. Why? Because we're able to find where they're at. They're in their room. They're on the Rose Garden. They're getting food. They're getting sleep. They're getting rest. They're able to go to their doctor's appointments. They're able to get the mental health they need. They're able to focus on the recovery. That's what there is. We have people getting employment, and then to get employment nowadays, you need an ID, you need your social, you need these things. A lot of these, on that phone call, the lady was like, he lost these because he's having his in bags in areas. So, in order to get these type of services, we need these simple documents, which many of them don't, especially like on a rainy day today, right?
Yeah.
This is where a lot of things get lost. So these type of, I guess the master leases aren't the ones that are always going to be, that are, but when we are able to have clients and know where they're at, use difference on all the different ways and that's how we find out where they become homeless. So we connect them, build that rapport, find out where they're at, feed them, hopefully give them some security. And then that's where we connect to say, you know what, maybe they have some mental health things going on. Maybe, whether it's drug or alcohol induced, right? There's ways, whether it's trauma informed, where they have some trauma in their life that they went through that got them to that areas, no matter what it may be. Whether it's, finances. So all the different ways, but the biggest point of that is being able to take time to build that trust where they're able to open up to you so you can find that core problem. And then from there moving forward, grow in the case management and finding the services. We have the services around here. Like I said, I mentioned many of them.
Right. And we have a couple of questions to that, Al. I'm sorry to cut you off because we're getting some really good specific questions in the chat. But related to what you've spoken about, there's been a lot of questions about data and data sources and how we vet that data to know if it's accurate. So I want to put that clause into sharing data. So one of the is 68% of individuals that are experiencing homelessness, their homelessness was caused by a traumatic incident, whether physical, sexual, psychological, or emotional. And so that trauma, again, in terms of self-medication, what we're seeing in terms of substance abuse, disorders, mental health challenges, and we know that that trauma continues while they're living on the street. So it's compounded. And so I think what I'm seeing from folks is your acknowledgement that, look, not all individuals experiencing homelessness are the same, and the tailored approach to case management, it takes a lot of time. But you're right, it has to be nuanced, and it has to be approached differently. So a couple of things on the encampment response, kind of individual needs of concern form stack report. So the 4th week of the month, and I'm chuckling because we really try to keep that schedule because we want to be able to address some of these questions as well as be accountable to results in the region. Is the data reporting week. So the 4th week of the month is data reporting. So actually, Chris from Code Enforcement provides a report of reports received in the region, locations of those encampments and individuals of concern, and how they've been addressed by the city. So we will have that going into, I believe it's the December 23rd meeting. We also had a question about can CityNet answer, clients allowed to use on property? And Brad, we know the answer is absolutely not. And can you just speak to, though sobriety is not required, you absolutely have a code of conduct for the property itself and for clients that are in that bridge housing program?
100% right. I mean, we have a code of conduct that goes, that everyone signs when they go in. So when we were in the encampments early on, I was there myself, and we give that and everyone reads it. And we go through that as a case management exercise. Everyone understands that this is an opportunity for them to sort of stabilize themselves. And then it's monitored on an ongoing basis. We have staff around the clock. So through standard case management, we do not do drug testing, but we monitor that on an ongoing basis. If somebody is a danger to themselves or others, including our staff, that is my staff that's there, we are not interested in that sort of being a scenario that we would support long-term. So that becomes, so we go through a sort of a normal process of disciplinary action where we sort of monitor that, we track it, we cite it, we give warnings. And if that continues, we have no problem exiting people from the program. And we have done that a number of times. But as a general rule, we don't have that as a condition to move in. It is something we monitor on an ongoing basis and have seen success along those lines.
And Brad, there was a question just about how thorough those room searches are. And I know, again, you're looking to make sure that they're adhering to that code of conduct specifically.
Yeah, I mean, we're not turning over everything. We're not, we're not going through there with dogs, for example, but we are going through there with eyes, sight. We know these individuals. Al leads those. So we are very clear of what sort of behavior has been manifesting itself. We have daily logs from security. I read those every day from our team. So we are monitoring things very, very close. Al, you want to speak to that anymore? But I think it's a standard walkthrough. We go through the entire room regularly.
Yeah, every week they do it. Like I said, we do, route checks. As far as our, security, and that's one thing that when I was telling you the other night, when I stopped by the property, I just made sure the communication between our security and our staff, that their staff 24 hours, is keeping that communication. So, for example, there was one instance recently where I can give you an example where, like I said, someone had a bottle of vodka, from there, they were having it, security addressed it. From there, in an informed harm reduction manner that we had our staff address it. Next morning, I see our triage report. And just like, Brad said, we received the security, we have our triage. From there, I contacted them and we moved forward with the steps of understanding that this is a process, this is not acceptable. That person got a write-up. We let them know, the next steps that will be necessary if this type of behavior continues. off the property. Like I said, that's one thing that we are working on, the fact that you have to be an example of, the agencies you're working with, where you live, all those type of things.
Mhm.
Right? And those are the type of mindsets that I want you guys to understand, that we are now, the transformation and the growth that we are working with our clients to provide is different. Something as simple as doing their own laundry. We set up with Laundroland, all right? Just got off the phone with Sherry, the owner of them, 2 calls ago, right? To set up that transformation of them doing their own laundry, setting those times up, taking the time to go through that process, just like you and I.
Right.
So it's a full transformation that we're doing of the mindset, taking care of the mind, body, the way they live, so that they can really transform. Because the downfall in this community is the supportive housing. And that's one thing that CityNet and us, myself, I'll speak for myself, don't have control over. And I see that's one of the big downfalls in this community. So we're doing our best to set them up for that success. So they need the least amount of supportive housing, because they're ready to fully live, cook, clean, keep their room ready for inspections, doctor's appointments, all the things that we would do on a daily basis is what they're preparing for. And one of them is, if you have drug and alcohol abuse and you're going through that phase, being able to take care of that. And when it is, if you're out to dinner, having a drink with the family, eating a nice steak, and you want to have a glass of wine.
Yeah. Thank you, Al. I appreciate that. We're getting a few comments and questions in the chat. I just want to make sure that we're addressing them. But Councilmember Freedom, I see that your hand is up as well.
Hello, everyone. Sorry I was late. I had a prior meeting. Just to follow up on this, the question of alcohol and other substance abuse, and the conversation we're just having. But in terms of those who are in there who have those issues, of course, they're not allowed on property, but the concern is that they just go off property into the neighborhoods and use and then come back. Is there any requirement for them to get into services, alcohol or drug treatment programs, to be in there, or are we offering those on site, because this is wraparound services? So can you speak to that level of, if they're here, what are we doing to get them into those treatment programs while they're stable, so that they're not going out into the neighborhoods, just using it out in the neighborhood so they don't get caught on property and get kicked out and then coming back?
Brad, can you speak to that in general? And then I just want to address some of the comments that are disrespectful in the chat. We really like to maintain a level of respectful discourse and dialogue with folks. And we'll get to specific questions as well. But Brad, just speaking to using and getting folks, because all engagement in service is voluntary, unless, again, they go through the restorative court program, which has been on pause, where they're offered treatment instead of jail time, be able to pursue.
I'll answer it as briefly as I can, just because I know there's lots of different. So the answer is, it's not a lockdown facility, right? So the reality is we allow people to go in and out of the property. We do monitor when they come back. If they are inebriated when they come back, they are not let back onto the property. So it's sort of, it is, the reality is people can leave, and what they do, we are not monitoring them. We are not tracking them. We do monitor them when they come back, and there is a curfew. So we do monitor the in and out, and 100% yes. We will do anything we can to connect these individuals with the resources that exist in the city. 100% yes. That's standard case management, is that we will connect them with the resources that do exist. And we can't force them to take them, but we can be very winsome and persuasive and resilient in our offering of those services, and we do.
And we also have a South County Crisis Stabilization Center, which is just new in the last 18 months, that allows us, if someone is visibly intoxicated, to be able to refer them to that sobering center, bring them to that location, and have them treated again to be less. I appreciate the comments about illegal activity versus problematic behavior, but it is very nuanced. But if they're impacting a region in the neighborhood, as well as hurting themselves or others, that we can take those actions immediately. Jeff, we always really, I would say from a lot of residents and business owners, get some feedback about their home state, their home city, being able to take on the cost of supporting that individual who's experiencing homelessness. We've also, again, had some questions about the legitimacy of the data from the point in time count, where we know that 78% of individuals who are sharing their story with us report that their last permanent address was Santa Barbara, and that most folks prefer to stay in a region that they know, that they feel comfortable in, even if they're experiencing homelessness. But we also know, the weather in California. It brought me here from Boston, Massachusetts 13 years ago. So we know that, again, we don't want to deny that that's a reality as well. But Jeff, do you want to speak to the movement of individuals experiencing homelessness, where they're from, and again, regardless of where they're from, that we provide them supportive services and housing placements if they would like to stay here? Jeff, oh yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I would say that this is the only, I just want to remind everyone, this is the only time in my 17 years of working on this issue that a city has created regional action plan calls where there's a true balance between responding to the needs you're bringing up on the call and also trying to respond to the needs we see with individuals and families experiencing homelessness. So I just want to remind everyone, we're not trying to escape as we talk about the needs of people on the streets, and the reality of that is only to explain why the process often takes so long, is because we also have a 66% chronic homeless number in the county of Santa Barbara, where most cities have 27%, which means we have a lot of people who have been out here for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We have two data sources that support the fact that most of the people experiencing homelessness in our city are residents. They're not travelers. They're not, what's the other word that's used? Oh, not travelers. What's the other term we use that I don't like? I'm blanking right now. But so two sources say 76 to 78 our homeless management information system, our point of time gate data, both back up that people, their last permanent housing address or where they became homeless was in our county. So that means their medical doctor, their family, their friends are all local to the county. 20% are travelers. So that does mean there are people that are here that aren't residents, and that, so both CityNet, SBAC, law enforcement also do what we call diversion and reunification for those opportunities where we can get somebody back, and it costs approximately $300 each time, to a family member or a friend, or a situation that's safe and that's good for both ends, both for the individual and where they're going. We make those matches, and I know CityNet's doing that on a weekly basis, as well as SBPD. They do reunification, as well as multiple other partners in their shelters work on diversion and reunification. We want to be absolutely transparent and straightforward about what's going to work. And I noticed in there about, what's the use of another site visit? The use of a site visit is that usually what we do is we also bring the city can get engaged in where we need to make environmental changes, or all of our teams may not be aware of these areas. You may not, behavioral wellness may be aware or may not be aware. Public health may be aware or not be aware. So you have to mobilize the right teams to build rapport and relationship with those people in those regions. So this is homelessness is very, and I know this is not helping you. I just came from a meeting with all the waterfront hotel owners who are also going through this very same experience on the waterfront and are very frustrated. And we talked about how do we create a local strategic plan just for the waterfront so we can address the issue that they're seeing. So I hope that answered your question, Barbara. I know it's extremely frustrating with what's going on. Homelessness is affecting all of our regions, and we know that.
And Conrad, Conrad has brought up, that we're assuming that they're answering truthfully. And so Brad and Al, because, you have that firsthand experience working with folks, have you also seen the consistency of their last permanent address being the region in which they're currently located as you go through the documentation readiness process? Or are you finding and discovering that no, their last permanent address was not here? Brad,
that's accurate.
Yeah. So
doesn't necessarily mean they went to high school here, but it does mean that they lived here recently and in some capacity. And then that's sort of, as you mentioned, sort of the affordability of housing, the ability to pay for that housing, and some sort of trauma and or breakdown relationally are the three reasons why they become homeless. What perpetuates their homelessness and turns into chronic, meaning more than a year, Those are often exacerbated by other things, but those are the reasons that people become homeless initially.
And again, there's some questions about services and services provided. I believe I can state factually, and correct me if I'm wrong, we do not provide more services than other coastal communities. So we're not an exception in terms of the level of service provided. And services are required. So we need to have low barrier emergency shelters to be able to receive any federal or state funding to be able to address this issue. So that we also need to provide a level of service provision, not only because we have individuals in need, but we're required to do so to receive or be eligible for certain funding streams as well. So I want folks to understand that nuance, as well as the enforcement piece, which is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decided at the end of 2019 to be able to enforce illegal lodging, you need to have a place, a shelter bed for someone to go to. And at any given night, we have about 6 to 12 shelter beds that happen to be open. And some enforcement is able to happen because of that. But in general, we have a 262 emergency shelter bed need, specifically to our point in time count from 2020, that we have to be able to create, to be able to enforce more. So it is this reality that we're dealing with too, is that, liability and legally, there are things that we need to adhere to and follow too, as well as providing compassionate care to individuals experiencing homelessness. So it's both. I hope people can hear that we're both compassionate and empathetic about what you're dealing with, feeling unsafe in your neighborhoods, what you've observed, what you're dealing with in terms of impacts to your homes, communities, feeling unsafe walking in regions, but also compassion and empathy for individuals experiencing homelessness, because those circumstances are just as nuanced and just as complicated. So we're really trying to achieve both here. So a couple of things as we close out. Karen, I see that you're here, and I know that you're trying to multitask at the same time, but specifically in terms of the site visit for next week. And again, I hear you to say another site visit is not helpful, but what we know from experience is the number of times individuals are engaged, and by a variety of providers with consistency, they're more apt to be open to services. It's building that trust and rapport that Al has spoken about. And it also gives us insight to be able to be helpful to providers as SB Act to be able to address needs in that neighborhood, as well as more helpful to residents and business owners about your specific needs in that region. But Karen, I'm hearing early afternoon, is that 12:30, 1 o'clock for next Thursday? And then Robert, you also suggested early afternoon as well. Any confirmation there? Or we can just set that time based on your feedback. And we will put that out. Karen has offered, it's Karen saying yes. Karen has offered to kind of be the lead to communicate to residents in the area to be able to join us through that site visit to again pinpoint areas that we need to be targeting. Kayla, any questions that you've seen that we have not been able
sorry,
to
Barbara,
address?
before we move on,
Yeah.
for the site visit, we'll get a time, but where does everybody meet? You might have done this earlier, so I apologize if I was a little bit late. There might have been some others, but what time and where?
We're going to prioritize the Hope, Larada, Hitchcock. So it could be maybe in front of Gardens of Hope or the Y. I'll work with Karen, Councilmember Friedman, to identify that specific location and communicate right back to all of you time and specific location where we'll start that walkthrough.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question about summarizing all of the stats. So this recording will be available on our YouTube after. So if you want to be able to rewatch, but as well, in addition to that, I'll be pulling together some stats kind of from that CityNet has mentioned, as well as others, in order to pull together some meeting minutes. If you'd like them, I don't want to bomb your emails too much. I know that you receive a lot of emails all the time. So if you are interested in receiving some of those meeting minutes, please do follow up with me or Barbara through our emails. I'll put my email in the chat. But I think a lot of the other questions have been covered in part or in full, and I'll go back through the chat as well and see if we need to follow up with longer answers. I know we're close to 11 a.m.
Okay, and a couple of things just to note on the agenda as well. The annual point in time count. So Conrad, I see you. This is where we get that data. It's happening January 26th from 5:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. across the city and across the county, all at the same time. So we'll provide more detail during our next meeting about how you can engage and sign up if you're willing to do so. I think what we have found helpful again is if we have residents engaged from specific neighborhoods, we're able to get that more accurate count. This is really important, I will say, I wouldn't say we're not even post-COVID, but because of COVID, this count is even more important because we are anecdotally seeing an increase in individuals experiencing homelessness, an increase in individuals experiencing vehicular homelessness, and we need to be able to capture that. We also have 4 different funding streams that only use the point in time count to be able to allocate resources to us. So the accuracy of that count is exceptionally important moving forward to be able to make sure that we have sufficient resources to support the region. Councilmember Sneddon.
Thank you. I do just want to emphasize that if people do participate in the point in time count, it's really impactful to be able to talk with individuals directly, and you can ask those questions directly, like, are you from a different area? What brought you here? And sometimes, I mean, I'll confirm what you're saying, that some people say, well, I came here because the panhandling is good and I don't check into services because I'm an alcoholic and I don't want to give that up. That certainly is some of the conversation. And then some of the conversations are really different from that and give a really different insight into who it is. And you can pick an area exactly in these target areas that we're talking about, and for yourself get a really good idea of who it is in our particular areas. And it's I would just recommend it for those, all of you here who are really involved and really want to see solutions. A big part of that is getting a handle on who we actually have.
Agreed. It is a very valuable experience, I will say, from firsthand, having experienced it myself many times. Thank you for bringing that up. And then at our next meeting, we'll say, how you can log on. They're also doing it by groups because of COVID for safety reasons. So if, again, working with folks during our walkthrough of the region next week, if you're interested, we can actually sign up as a group together as well. Because of the exchanges on Nextdoor, which I will say I'm trying to do my best to provide data when it's available, engage with folks one-on-one. I've had some wonderful one-on-one conversations with people that are really passionate and really care about the community and the neighborhood. San Francisco is a horrible title. It's about progressives ruining cities. It's a horrible title, but I dug in, folks, and I will say it's very informative. It's a very detailed read about housing first as a policy, what successes we've had, what failures we've had, and it has a really well-rounded proposal about really combining the many departments that work on homelessness to be more focused, more strategic. There's still some idealistic suggestions in there, but I actually think it provides a really well-rounded framework about where we've been and where we're headed with certain policies that have been implemented. So I downloaded it on Audible because of Conrad. There's been some mention of it. And I will say the title is one thing, but even the first chapter opens you up to someone who's really experienced and actually is a progressive, saying, what reforms are working and what's not working. So, and I will just say from my experience, I've only been in this work for 2 years. It seemed pretty accurate, both data-wise as well as case study-wise in certain cities, as well as kind of firsthand experience. So thank you, Conrad, for bringing that up and suggesting that it really is an informative read. Karen, I see a couple comments. SB Act is committed to doing these walkthroughs every single month on the 3rd week of the month as part of our regional action plans. But if Al is available, behavioral wellness, we have Chris, who's joined this regional action plan, and then the encampment response task force lead with the county Lucille Boss, depending on availability, should be able to be there. Also a note on availability before we close, because we've heard some feedback of why 10 a.m. on Thursdays, and we get it. Everyone's working and it's really difficult to participate. And that is also why we're recording, capturing meeting minutes, and making sure people have access to these action items. It is because we have everyone here. We have Sergeant DeJean, we have CityNet, we have our council member leadership, we have city staff, code enforcement, and others who are working to be able to address your concerns. and a number of other service providers. The Day Center, Father John is here, and we're able to answer questions in real time for you. So although I can answer a lot, it's just so helpful to have people that have that experience, that knowledge, that firsthand involvement to be able to address your concerns. So this is why it's 10 a.m., but definitely open to perhaps once a month having something in the evening or the weekends to be able to hear more from folks and engage them. So your feedback on that, please email me if you have thoughts about another time we could host just to engage more folks. Councilmember Friedman?
Where's the link for everybody to have it for these recordings and other information?
We've been posting and uploading on our YouTube. So we followed up with the agenda that YouTube link is available. We did post it in Nextdoor. I'll always follow up if you are not able to attend a weekly meeting with that YouTube link to the video once it's uploaded. So we record it, get sent to the cloud, upload it to YouTube. So it's a platform that's a little bit more accessible. And then we send that link out. I sent it as part of the agenda this week, and Karen actually took on posting it in Nextdoor as well. And we usually try to do that within 24 hours to get it up there on the SB Act YouTube channel. Karen, you actually muted the Nextdoor posts. I agree. So the distribution list is really important. So if you have folks, again, that want to be involved, sharing their email address with Kayla at sbact.org. We've been adding on that distribution list, forwarding it out. And again, we post the Zoom and the details. That Zoom link remains consistent weekly. Again, we won't have a Zoom meeting next week. We will be in person next week. The 4th week of the month, which is that 23rd, we will have the data reporting meeting. And then we will not have a meeting on that 5th week of the month during the holidays. Any other last questions before we close out? Oh, great suggestion on Newshawk and Independent to be able to share information on how to access the meetings. Thank you. All right, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your input, your feedback, your honesty, and we will continue to work with you, and we want you to see visible results. That's our commitment, and we will work to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So thank you for your time today, and we will see some of you next week. Really appreciate it.